Hey everyone, welcome to Blue Bowl TV. We're going to try a new format here. These are kind of response ideas I've had to an undercurrent of FCS that has been floating around the UB ecosystem for several years, and it's been driven mainly by Bucky Gleason over at the Buffalo News. Bucky wrote a piece right after our loss to Albany where he said, I'll spare you a dissertation about UB playing football in the wrong football league, or how the athletic department would be better served if it played in Albany's conference and poured its resources into upgrading its basketball program and capturing a corner of the market waiting for them. Now, I just realized he says he's going to spare us a dissertation, but pretty much everything except for the sentence that says, I'll spare you a dissertation, is the abstract of his dissertation. And it's a dissertation which has begun to take root amongst those in the Western New York community who don't understand how college sports work. They don't understand how college sports finances work. They saw Buffalo lose to Albany, which is bad. It's very bad. And they see one of the major writers from the Buffalo News keep beating this drum about UB dropping down to play in Albany's conference, which would be, I guess, play football in the CAA and play basketball in the NEC. Is that what he wants to do? Um, I don't know. As a whole, this article didn't bother me that much because this was one little segment of an article that I will link down below, which was a pretty decent read. It talked about how UB worked really hard to promote this game. They did everything right. And then they lost it, and that's going to hurt attendance the rest of the year. And I think those are solid points, and they may be valid points. But I'm not thrilled with the fact that this paragraph has brought out, the rabble rousers who want to just run onto forums, go on Twitter, go on Facebook, and talk about how Buffalo does not belong in the football bowl subdivision and how it's holding back our basketball program. Now, you can make an argument about how Buffalo shouldn't be playing FBS football because we've struggled since moving up in 1999. But the argument that it's somehow going to magically help our basketball program, I think, requires some form of scrutiny that they never seem to apply. So I'm going to be nice and I'm going to apply the scrutiny for them. And if I'm wrong, hey, then I'm wrong. Their thesis is that because FCS programs typically run football budgets smaller than UB's, the extra savings could be poured into basketball. And then with no basketball power in Erie County, UB would step up and become the next Wichita State. Um, I think it's arguable whether or not St. Bonaventure would count as a basketball power in Erie County. They're not in Erie County as such, but they have a big market following. And of course, the Buffalo News is all over them all the time. He most summed this up when he did an interview with Alan Green over the offseason where he said, I'm not saying UB should drop football. I'm saying they should be realistic. Find a smaller conference for football and a better conference for basketball, and stop unnecessary spending. The money saved by playing at the FCS level, citation needed, previously known as Division 1A, with other schools such as Albany and Stony Brook, should be redistributed within the athletic department. UB has the potential to corner the local college basketball market by playing in a better league. Again, we have St. Bonaventure, we have Syracuse, and we have alumni bases from Canisius and Niagara. I'm not sure any school can corner the basketball market in Erie County because I don't think it's cornerable. I think Buffalo has definitely been growing its market. I think winning back-to-back MAC championships and some of the good press that were brought in by Danny White hiring Bobby Hurley, and then following that up with Nate Oates, and even the program going through tremendous struggles, but still winning those championships is huge. But the core of the thesis is the differences between FBS, FCS, and how that somehow would pour a ton of money into basketball. So let's talk about the difference between FBS and FCS real quick. The thing everyone knows is FBS plays in bowl games. The top four have a playoff, and all the other ones are exhibition games. The FCS, you have conference champions go into playoffs along with a few at large. The money difference start to come in when you talk about the number of allowed scholarships. FBS allows 85 scholarships, FCS allows 63 scholarships. Finally, the other difference that a lot of people don't know is the number of sports. FBS schools have to sponsor 16 varsity sports. FCS schools only need to sponsor 14. A lot of this is moot because most schools, even the powerful FCS schools sponsor 15 or 16 sports. But we'll throw it in there anyways, just so you know. That's about it. You see, the savings you're going to have are from dropping sports and cutting scholarships. That's about it. There's no magic bullet that you get to shoot when you're an FCS school. It could work for some schools, sure, but I don't see schools left and right dropping from FBS to FCS. I see schools spending their brains out to get up to FBS. I see ODU, I see UMass, I see Georgia State. I see a lot of schools really, really wanting to be FBS. And make no mistake, if Albany or Stony Brook were offered a ticket to FBS, they would be on it tomorrow. But, don't take my word for it. Let's just look at the numbers. All right. I'm going to put my Bucky Gleason hat on. Sorry, I can't help it. That's my Bucky Gleason hat. I'm going to put my Bucky Gleason hat on and tell you why we're going to save all this money that we can then pour into basketball. Well, the cost savings come from mainly the scholarships. UB would save about $1 million by cutting 44 scholarships. Because you cut 22 men's scholarships, you can also cut 22 women's scholarships. That 44 adds up to $1 million or so. Now, if you drop 22 women's scholarships, you're also going to drop at least one women's sport. I would assume rowing or softball or something. I don't know what you drop, but the powers that be could say, well, we have 22 fewer female athletes. Most college varsity teams don't have 20 scholarships. So that would save another $90,000 to $150,000 in coaches after you drop those coaches. Coaching salaries are actually not an area where UB would save a lot of money. Lance Leipold's base salary is not, very much higher than the FCS Albany coach who just beat us. I'm sorry, his base salary is lower. With benefits and stuff, he's a bit higher. But we're talking $100,000 at most because UB tends to spend low on coaches. So that's a total savings of around $1.2 million. So we can put that into our basketball program. We can become Wichita. Count me in. I love it. I got my FCS cap on. We're ready to go. There's no way this is going to break down. And I think that's it. I think we're ready to kind of sign off here. And just before I sign off, give me 2 seconds to think about this. There are some revenue things we should probably talk about. I don't know if they're going to add up to 1.2. That's a lot of money. Let's see, just to be sure. The first thing is obviously going to be, because we're a bowl subdivision team, we get a much bigger college football playoff payout than the conferences in the FCS. So the Colonial Athletic Association would be the most reasonable football home for Buffalo in the FCS. And if we're very lucky and we drop, we could land the A10 for all non-football sports. So, because the A10 is a far better, richer league in everything else than the CAA. In 2015, the Mid-American Conference got $14 million. That breaks out to about $1.16 million per school. The Colonial Athletic Association gets, I think somewhere in the order of $225,000 per school. I have a source for that. I'll link it below. So you see, no matter what arrangement we have, if we play CAA football, that 1.2 million really quickly becomes just a little more than $250,000. But that's still a lot of money. $250,000. You think about that. You add $250,000 to what we're paying Nate Oates, and we're up in the $600,000-$700,000 range. All right, cha-ching. We can be that program. We can still be Wichita. Maybe Wichita light, considering some of those FCS programs pay their coaches 1.8, 1.9 million, but we can definitely outspend the heck out of our local rivals and perhaps St. Bonaventure. So there's other things to consider, though. One is the television contract, right? Television contract revenue is huge. The Mid-American Conference just finally got a decent TV deal after years of being in a really bad deal. Every year, UB gets $670,000 from ESPN. The Colonial Athletic Association gets a small amount from CBS, but they don't really get any of that to the schools. That runs their football off. That runs their conference offices. The A10 gets a decent-sized contract for a league with no football. They actually get, I think, about $350,000. So when you factor that in, we're losing money in either league. Now, you could look at the A10 and say, yeah, $55,000, that's relatively small. That's almost negligible in terms of an athletic budget of $30 million. The Colonial Athletic Association, though, $500,000, that's not a small chunk of change we're losing. So we're losing money in either place. So, I've lost my FCS hat here. If we're losing money, why would we do this? Well, because I like to give you all the full picture, I will tell you the one huge benefit of being in the A10 or the Colonial Athletic Association, and that would be the NCAA basketball payout units from the tournament. The MAC is and has been a one big league for a long time. And as a one bid league, the Mid American Conference gets a pittance of what you see from the Colonial or the A10. The difference is about $352,000 for the Colonial, which brings our total loss with the Colonial to $53,000. The difference between the A10 is $488,000, and that brings the savings. That brings us back into the green in the A10 by a tune of about $500,000. Okay, so if we can swing the A10, and then we can make this work. We can be a big basketball power. That'd be awesome. We can be better than St. Bonaventure, who's in the A10, and get more press. And we'll have an FCS team too, because we need to keep football, as Bucky said. I'm trying to think if there's any other thing, and there's, I think, one intangible we need to consider, and that is the football payout games. Now, football payout games are a big part of college teams' budgets. It's why Albany came to Buffalo. Albany came to Buffalo because we were going to pay them $225,000. They did it last year to take a beating, and they came this year for the same amount of money, and they got a nice upset on top of it. The reason why Buffalo is going to Minnesota next year is for $900,000, not because they really want to come and see all the lakes. Now, typically FBS teams get a lot more money. Buffalo's trips to power conferences usually draw us about $1 million. Rutgers, Nebraska, Kansas State, Minnesota, all these teams you see on our future schedules are giving us somewhere between $900 and $1.2 million to come play. Usually your FCS teams get about $400,000 to $600,000. What's worse for this picture is that the Big Ten is ceasing FCS games. The SEC is talking about ceasing FCS games. Some mid-major schools like Houston have said they're not going to do FCS games. The number of payout games available for FCS teams is going to decline rapidly. And what happens when the market for something gets smaller? When the market gets smaller, the cost gets smaller. So right now, I'll be really generous and say we only lose $500,000 a year. But in actuality, we might be losing $750,000 to $1 million a year, because we would not be able to play many of the P5 teams. We would be stuck with the paydays like the ones that Albany just took with us for $250,000 instead of $1 million. Well, now we throw these back in, and we're back to losing more than $500,000 with the Colonial, and we're back to losing $67,000. Call it even, to be in the A10 and the CAA. So either way, we lose money. How much we lose is relative. So this idea that we're going to save $1.2 million by being Stony Brook or Albany, it just doesn't stand up to scrutiny. It never does. And I've done this in writing, and I'm doing this in a video now, in the hopes that maybe people will see this and stop listening to the drumbeat that says if Buffalo dropped to FCS, we'd be awesome. Football is a great program for Buffalo. It's great for us to play teams like Ohio State and Minnesota and Rutgers and Nebraska. And those aren't going away because we are in the Bowl subdivision. It's great to get, more than $1 million a year for being in the Bowl subdivision, just from being in the Bowl subdivision. It's great to have a TV contract that brings in $600,000 a year just for being in the Bowl subdivision. Any losing of that would not make us a basketball power. It would make us Canisius. And Buffalo doesn't need another Canisius. We already have Canisius and Niagara.